Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mind Your Soul. And today's episode is about languishing, how you use that to actually flourish in your life, and how you can unlock happiness with positive psychology. And today's guest is Dr. Maike, who helps people with this. And a huge fan of your work. Will you please introduce yourself to our listeners, Maike?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Farah. And I'm a huge fan of your work too. So it's fantastic to be here today. Yeah, well, I am probably better known as the Flourishing Doc. And what I specialize in is positive psychology. So I'm a psychologist by trade. I did a PhD in behavior change techniques, so helping people establish new and better habits in life. And these days, I help predominantly with transitioning from languishing to flourishing. So I always say I help people and organizations understand what we as humans need in order to flourish in life or cultivate mental well-being so that we can realize our potential and create impacts that excite us.
Wow, that is so powerful. Like everything you just said, this is something our listeners would benefit from. And because we're in this space of mental health and to give tips on how they can improve their lives. And sometimes it's not difficult things to implement, it's basically about having that understanding first of all, and then implementing small things to work towards that flourishing happiness, as you just said. But maybe many of our listeners do not know what languishing means. So maybe we could start with an explanation of what it is.
Absolutely. And so I guess maybe some of your listeners have come across the term during the COVID-19 pandemic, because at the time, Adam Grant wrote an article about this that, went quite viral, that described this state of languishing because at the time, many people actually unknowingly perhaps experienced it. So when many of us lived in isolation and because of the pandemic were deprived of many different things in life that we used to take for granted, such as being able to see our friends whenever we wanted to, or going to work and mingling with, our colleagues, or just going outside, pursuing our hobbies, doing fun things like that. When we were deprived of them, at some stage, I guess many of us started to languish. And what that felt like was like you're just a functioning, living zombie or a bit of a robot, that whole idea of Groundhog Day. Feeling like you just sleep, eat, work, repeat, where nothing is really wrong per se, and you don't actually necessarily have a mental illness like perhaps anxiety disorder or depression or anything like that, but you kind of feel bored out of your brain. So it's a little bit similar to maybe if your listeners have heard the term bore out, where you just feel bored, you feel like you're barely alive,
Yeah.
or you're alive but barely living. Um,
Yeah.
like you have this sense of stagnation and stuckness and emptiness,
Yeah.
that kind
I
of
call it
thing.
stuck on autopilot. Same thing. And trapped in life. Same thing, basically. Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly what it's like. And I guess you can also understand if you start thinking about the opposite of languishing, which is flourishing. And that's actually just a different word for having high mental well-being. So
Mm.
flourishing is when you would say, I am deeply engaged in life. I get excited about life, not necessarily every second of every day. That
That
would
would
be
be
weird.
weird. Yeah.
Yeah. But you feel like you have this lust for living and you are deeply happy and fulfilled and you just
Yeah.
feel very alive. So that is the opposite of languishing.
I guess we're doing the same things. I love this, but with different take on things. As I'm a neuroscientist and you're a psychologist, so obviously it's a different way of seeing things. But that's beautiful that you help people with that. So how do you do that? Like, what are the strategies to implement? I know it's like a big question because there are probably many,
Mm.
but like, where do you start? Yeah, where do you start? I think that's interesting for our listeners. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, I love working practically. So, I do some education, I do some individual, one-to-one coaching, again,
Yeah.
probably very similar to you. So I
Yeah.
guess what is really important to understand if you're, let's say, just a listener now to this podcast is what this actually means. What is this continuum from languishing to flourishing? We just described what they both feel like and what they are. And I just also want your listeners to understand that it's a vital part, and I always say it's the other, the forgotten half of mental health. We always think of mental health as just mental illness, let's be honest,
Yeah.
right? Depression,
Yeah, yes,
anxiety,
yes,
and so
that's
forth.
what comes to mind as the first thing when we say mental health. It's like mental illnesses come forth.
And isn't
Yeah.
that so
Yeah.
sad? And it just
I never
describes
thought
the
about it
health.
actually until you just said it now. And it's like it's very true. We
Yeah,
associate with it. So we have to
yeah.
change something in society, right? Because right?
Exactly. Well, because we all live in this healthcare system that really is a disease system, isn't it? Because all we do is we diagnose and then we treat illnesses. But we should really be a lot more proactive about our actual health. We know that health is so much more than the absence of illness. Physically, we understand that, but also mentally, it's the same thing. We
Yeah.
need to have two things in order to be completely mentally healthy, and that's the absence of illness, but also the presence of well-being or flourishing. So, how do you do that? The first step is always to empower yourself through education to understand what flourishing actually entails. And as anything in life, there's a few different models, but you could broadly say that in order to flourish, we need three things. One is emotional well being, then we have psychological well being, and we need social well being. So I'll just briefly explain that. Emotional well being, you could say, is joy. We all need joy in life. And I don't mean this in a hedonistic way, as it, which sometimes has a little bit of a negative reputation, but we all do need moments of joy just to get us through, let's be honest, the roller coaster that is life, all the tough bits, to allow us to achieve our goals and pursue our dreams. We need joy in order to keep us going. So
Oh,
it's roughly, a little bit more positive affect than negative affect. And also a bit of a cognitive evaluative component here, and that we also need some life satisfaction. That when we look at our lives and we go, okay, what are our wants and needs, and where am I already with that? That we go, at the end of the day, we're not doing too badly. So that is emotional well-being. Psychological well-being is something that maybe in everyday terms we would call a deep sense of happiness. This is where we perceive meaning in life. This is
mhm.
where we feel like we're growing as a person. We need that in order to thrive in life. So we're setting goals, we're accomplishing goals, we're mastering skills, we're chasing our passions, and we're pursuing our hobbies to the point where we're deeply engaged in life. And, some of your listeners, and I'm sure you know it, might have heard of the flow state, that
Yeah.
state where you're doing something, maybe something creative, something that aligns with your strengths and your passions, to the point where you're losing track of time or time becomes a bit warped. These states are really important for us to flourish. So that's your psychological well-being. And then your social well-being is so often underestimated. It's literally, a good relationship with yourself. Let's not forget that, often forgotten about.
So
Yeah,
important to
but
highlight.
also,
Yeah.
yeah, beautiful connections with others. So both quantity and quality, because people often ask that what's more important, having lots of friends or, just really good friends. Depends
Yeah.
on you, but we need a little bit of both. But also feeling like you're part of society and perhaps have a
Absolutely.
sense of being able to contribute to something greater than yourself. So that's social well-being, and again, often underestimated. And we know from the longest study on happiness ever, the Harvard study of human adult development, I think it was called, that's been running since 1938, that the key to our happiness and longevity is most likely our relationships,
Yes,
more
and I
so
keep
than
saying
anything
this
else.
to clients. They're like, I'm doing mindfulness, I'm exercising. It's like you're alone the whole freaking day. Like,
Yeah.
get out if you like. And then they're like, oh, but I work online. Many of my clients are IT software engineers and they work from home online. And they sometimes go into the office, but they're very much alone most of the day. And I always tell them, like, then be in group activities. They do strength training alone. I'm like, no, do a group thing, see people, be with people.
Yeah.
It's so important and it's so underrated, like the importance for our brain, what it does to us, our mental well-being. Yeah.
I absolutely agree. And I love that you're giving your clients that advice. So that's so good because again, so many people forget about that, but it can't be underestimated. And so, once you understand what we need in order to flourish, you can then pause for a minute and take stock. Well, how are you doing in terms of emotional well-being? How are you doing in terms of your psychological well-being? How are you
Yeah.
doing in terms of your social well-being? And
Mm.
you can rate those different aspects and on a scale from 1 to 10, how are you doing, and then you see where you have the biggest gaps, and then you start thinking about, well, what might be some small but attainable goals you might be able to set in order to cultivate those aspects more.
That's
Sounds all a
beautiful.
bit abstract and theoretical, but
No,
and obviously
but
my clients, I walk them through it, but
yeah.
it's not rocket science. It really
No,
isn't. We just need to have that knowledge, and it's just unfortunately not something that is taught at schools yet.
it should be. So I have something
Yeah,
similar in my theaters. I call it from subconscious to conscious living, because
yeah,
often, as you said about, so it's just another word for it, but like you
yeah,
said, we are living on autopilot. So finding out like how are their habits, first of all, I always ask them like, what do you do? And they say,
yeah,
I don't have time. And then we figure you have 4 hours for yourself to pursue your
yeah.
passions. And they're like, oh shit, sorry for swearing. But it's like, and then they're surprised. So it's about, okay, habits. And I know this is something you also help with, because if we have unhealthy habits, it's always hard in the beginning to kind of change those habits. It's been part of us for like forever. So I
Yeah.
always look at how to change like one of them, replacing them with something positive, and then I
Yes.
build up from there. Because
Yeah.
sometimes they're doing things without even being conscious about those bad habits, and those are not affecting them positively in their life. So I know you have
Exactly.
something similar with the habits, right? So having those, like you said, emotional and psychology and the relationship, it all requires that we look at their time management and habits in order for them to actually do those things, right?
Exactly. And as I always say I specialize in two things. And this speaks to sort of my qualifications and what I do. It's positive psychology and the flourishing. Well, that is kind of what gives you the idea of what should you maybe be aiming for in order to feel deeply happy and
Yes,
engaged in
yes,
life.
yes,
And then the habit change, the self-leadership is what actually allows you to get there, because it's exactly what you're saying. You need to create the habits around that. The truth is in the actions, isn't it? And the things we do
yes.
every day. And I
There's a
love
lot
that you
of
brought
stuff.
Exactly. And I love that you brought in the word autopilot, because in the beginning, when you asked me, what is languishing, you could describe languishing as sort of always being on autopilot. And the thing is, autopilot is not a bad thing. We have the autopilot in order to save energy.
Yeah.
Autopilot just means you're acting habitually, and that is a very good and healthy
Yes,
energy
that was a
saving
good way of saying it. Yes.
characteristic
Yeah.
of our psyche. It's perfect as long as you are happy with the habits you have and you are happy with your autopilot.
Exactly.
So exactly. So I love that. And I love that you're pointing out, taking one habit at a time, and that you're looking at time and energy management. I always think, we might have time. In my experience with my clients, it comes down a little bit more to almost energy management, because you can have all the time in the world left at the end of the day. If you're buggered because you exhausted yourself and you didn't
I like
prioritize
that.
properly in
Yeah.
alignment with your goals and values and so forth, your time is useless pretty much. And if you can only watch Netflix at the end of the day, that's not time you can use to your own advantage, I guess.
Very, very well put. I love that you mentioned the energy, because everything we do, we are sending out energy. And that's what I always say, like what you consume, like mentally, who you surround yourself with, are those your people? Will you grow with them? Not that you always have to, but you know what I mean. Are they
Yeah,
benefiting you in a positive way? Do they
yeah.
have bad habits that contribute to your bad habits? Like you have
Hmm.
to evaluate everything when you're on this life-changing transitioning, I would
Yeah.
say. Yeah. So everything has to be questioned.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. And it's really good when you have a coach to help you walk you through with that, because they can really help you take stock, looking at the bigger picture and writing everything down and categorizing things and giving you an idea of how you can actually approach your entire life, which can feel overwhelming when you're in it just by
yeah,
yourself. And
of
another
course.
thing that just came to mind, in terms of speaking of energy management, I have it so often that people come to me and they almost feel like they need to confess that come the end of the day, they're just too lazy, they're not motivated enough or whatever to then, let's say, go to the gym and, exercise more like they've always wanted and they know they should and would be good for them and so forth. And in terms of energy management, I always think, people underestimate. They think being motivated means having the energy. And I constantly
Mm,
have to tell people being
same, same.
motivated, you're relying on feeling motivated. And motivation isn't having the energy, is mobilizing the energy. The energy itself needs to come from somewhere else. And so then we're talking about creating a foundation for a flourishing
Yes,
life, which is get enough and good quality sleep. And you would love this as a neuroscientist. And I know you do the same thing with your clients. Eating well,
I do.
moving enough, staying hydrated, all those basics that actually give you the energy you need. And also only then can we even, rely on that little bit of willpower we all have available every day, as long as we use it preferably early in the day when our willpower is still sort of charged enough. But I think it's interesting sometimes the myths there are around motivation and goal attainment and so forth. And I guess motivation being the energy is one of them.
Yeah, I'm very glad you mentioned it because I'm not always motivated to wake up at 5 like I do, but I like to start my mornings early because I have kids and I like to have my quiet time before I wake them up to get ready for school. So I have my time in the morning. I do my prayer meditation, I manifest, and then I actually prep clients because that's my peak hour. I'm like, that what works for me. We're all different, but it works for me. And then I get them up at 6:30, so I have 1.5 hour to do my thing. But I do spend like 15 to 30 minutes just on myself, tuning in the morning, and then doing some client work. And that's like my routine. But it took time to change it from 6 o'clock to 5 o'clock. So I also had a
Mm.
transition in waking up, and I did it like sporadically. I did it with like 15 minutes before, and then do, and now it's a habit. Like my alarm is up after me. Like I wake up by myself because it's a routine now, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and
I
then I
love that.
put
That's
kids up,
incredible.
and then I hit the gym 3 times right after because I'm on the go. So I'm driving, right? So I'm already in my gym wear, and then I do the heavy workout with I have a coach who helps me, and then I'm back to coaching, and I'm like alive and relived, and I've already done so many things like in the morning.
Yeah,
um, so it's finding out like what works for you because we're all different,
exactly.
but having those
Yeah,
habits in place, it's so important, like having that foundation. Then whatever happens, like you will get through it because you have the
yeah,
base foundation in place, right? And that's what we have
exactly.
science with first of all, right?
Exactly. And I love that you point out that even for you as a neuroscience scientist, you have all the knowledge in the world, right? But even that for you, you had to create that change gradually and step by step
It
and
was
bit by
hard, it was
bit.
not easy.
Yeah, it is not. And it's not that we can just have it all figured out and then we can operate by that. I think what's missing so often these days is a conversation around the fact that we're all human and we live in a system, in a complex system, and we are all constantly influenced by the system in different ways, and everything constantly changes and so forth. And that we don't all need to be those robots that have this very strict morning routine. I love that you point out whatever works for you. Sometimes I think, as soon as we started having a narrative around morning routines, it's like everyone just talks about, how we, operate and optimize our performance and everything.
It's
I
always
mean, I
about
love that.
optimization. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love part of that because I also constantly strive to be better and so forth. But I think we forget to live and to be human and to be spontaneous. I think what is even more perhaps than having good habits and routines is having self-trust, understanding that even when your routines get broken, you can rely on yourself to pick them back up, you
Exactly.
know?
And sometimes I
Yeah.
am more tired. Like after a weekend today, I'm extra tired because it's weekend. And I'm more
Yeah.
on the go when you have kids and being a single mom, I'm more on the go on the
Yeah.
weekend. than
Yeah.
during the week, because then they're in school and I'm doing my thing. And yeah, so Monday is always hard for me to get up. Not gonna lie, I struggle with it. Like I just sleep
Yeah.
a bit more in today. So I'm just
Yeah.
saying, like I do it too, because I'm no different from my clients, right?
Yeah.
As you just said,
Exactly.
I'm no different, but I try. And as long as we're putting in the intention,
Hmm.
that's what matters, right? So yeah,
Exactly. I love that.
yeah. So tell me, Maike, the
Mhm.
positive psychology and leadership. You already said some things you help them with and the pillars. So first, what do you look at when you help a client to flourish? So
It
where
depends.
do you
Mhm.
start? Because I look at habits. Do you do the same thing or?
Yeah. So it really depends what they're coming to me with. And my clients are very different. Some, literally tell me they just feel unhappy and unfulfilled. Some feel like something is missing. Some are going through a midlife crisis. Some feel like, everything is going well, but they know exactly they've got more to give professionally, but they don't know quite how to realize their potential. So, or others might be struggling with setting boundaries with other people. They just feel like they're people pleasers. It is so varied also because
Same.
I have a fixed group of clients from a workplace I work with in
Oh,
Australia.
that's
So I always
amazing.
say I'm doing a Better Up one woman show for this workplace who I've been working with for a couple of years. So there's a whole bunch of employees and leaders I work with. So that's a little bit more workplace based.
Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense.
but because it's so varied, you always have to look at where people are at and what they're hoping to get, and then you can look at, okay, what is currently missing. I often work with, so self leadership, for example. So when we talk about establishing habits, I look at sort of a more holistic picture of self leadership, which lies at the intersection of self knowledge, self goal setting, and self regulation. So self leadership meaning being able to identify and accomplish goals that are meaningful to you. Slight
Mm-hmm.
difference. So the meaningful is a very important sort of difference here, because everyone constantly sets goals, but are they meaningful to you? How many people chase goals that are goals that have a nice reputation in society, or that basically will lead to a life lived on other people's terms,
Mm-hmm.
rather than on your own terms. So take a uni student who's studying law because his or her parents would love them to be a lawyer, but is it really what they're passionate about? Not so sure. How many people chase the same old goals because they are well received in society, or something like that. So
Yeah.
meaningful goals, I think, is a key word sort of in self leadership. And that's something we can achieve when we understand ourselves. So having an understanding of our own strengths, of our own passions, talents, interests, but also our values. So some clients know themselves a little bit better already than others, and they might have a good awareness of that. And therefore, they also know that whatever goals they're after are definitely going to be meaningful to them, because we often chase goals that we think will make us happy, but when we achieve them, it's a bit of an anticlimax. And this is actually so common that we have a term for this in psychology. It's called miswanting. um, we're not very good at intuitively understanding what we need in order to be happy. So we got to be careful with our goal setting. And then it depends, is this client quite aware of what goal is going to be meaningful to them, and they've set this goal well, but they just struggle a little bit with self-regulation, the self-regulation part, the establishing habits part,
Mm,
understanding how to overcome the self-sabotage when you just really don't feel like enacting the goal behavior, or whatever that might be. Is it self-doubt? Is it feeling like an imposter and therefore avoiding something because anxiety has built up around it so much, or whatever? So it really depends on what people are struggling with, and you just got to catch them on their journey. Or is it that they just feel empty and they have no idea why? And then you start exploring maybe more of the flourishing components of emotional, social, and psychological well-being, and you see
yeah.
where they're sitting. And there are scales we can use, like tests that are freely well available, that we can use to identify that. I've got that available on my website as well. So there are assessment tools you can use to help people identify what's going on.
Absolutely, because if they don't know, how are they going to heal from it? That's what I always say. That's
Exactly.
why I have my subconscious to conscious living pillar,
Yeah,
because sometimes most of them they do not really know what's going on. Why are they feeling
exactly.
off? They don't feel motivated.
Yeah,
They don't feel happy suddenly, and it's like, okay, well, something has been going on, so we're gonna figure it
yeah,
out. Yeah, so that's the first thing, right? To figure that out, because
exactly.
otherwise, how are we going to help them?
Yeah. I mean, how do you approach that with your clients?
So I do a lot of things. I do CBT and I do hypnotherapy as well. So yeah,
Mm.
and I do use also tools like to ask questions,
Mm-hmm.
just like you do. So I do a
Mm-hmm.
roadmap with them to begin with, and that's the first
Mm-hmm.
session about accessing like what's going on with questions, and
Mm-hmm.
and then I actually do like half coaching and half hypnosis. So I take
Amazing.
them, yeah. So I take a theme like which is bothering the most, and then take
Mm-hmm.
them into hypnosis state, and then the subconscious mind is driving the car basically, and we get some
Mm.
answers, and then we can build on from there. That's basically how
Mm.
I do it, and I give them
That
some
sounds
tools.
incredible.
Yeah, just like you do, give them some tools like they can
Mm-hmm.
implement to begin with, so they can
Mm-hmm.
tune more into the intuitive voice, just like you said,
Mm-hmm.
because they need to be more in touch with themselves.
Yeah,
They have to figure out what they want in life, and my job is to
exactly.
coach them and to get that out, the potential out, so they have to figure it out themselves. So it's a working together, not me being a magic pill. That's what I always
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. That sounds amazing. That's
They have
wonderful.
to put in an effort, right? Everybody has to
Yes,
put in an effort, and it's a lifestyle, so it takes
exactly.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes time and it's a lifestyle. That's exactly it. And I guess, I engage a coach on, every now and then on a regular basis myself. And I don't know, it's one of those things, even though I've done this my whole life and I've been a coach for, gosh, what year is it? Many years.
I love
And
it.
I know the value of coaching firsthand, but also from seeing the journeys of my clients. Every time I engage a coach, it's not cheap and it stings. If you want to get a good coach, it's not cheap and it stings. I hate that. And so I tend to, sometimes I catch myself. I want to go for shorter coaching engagements, maybe just like 3 sessions or something like that. Or sometimes it's just one session because I feel like I just need a little bit of clarity. I need a coach to guide me to gain some clarity around something.
Yeah, and it's
But
always programs, right? It's always programs. Well, I have programs too, but I
yeah,
have I have worked with other people like a psychologist, other neuroscientists, other coaches where they just
yeah.
bought like 6 sessions with me or three because they just needed some clarity on some things. We just did mindset work most of the time.
Yeah. But I
Yeah.
just wanted to say, sometimes coachees, also might think, oh, maybe I just need, a little bit of clarity, just 3 sessions or something like that. And then I can do the rest on my own once I
Yeah,
know
that's
what I
not
need
how
to
it works.
aim for. And that's where they fall short because it's that accountability. It's that trying something out, something doesn't really work because there's a factor that we hadn't considered because again, life is complex, so and then on their own, they don't take the time and the energy and effort to sit down and take stock and go, okay, I didn't really do what I wanted to do this week. How come? Where did I fall short? What do I need to change? How can I overcome this? What is really at the crux of me not doing what I said I was going to do? And then readjusting the goal and then doing that again next week and again next week. So
We all
it's
need a
exactly
coach.
what you
That's what
said.
I say. A doctor needs
Yeah,
a
we
doctor.
all need a coach and we all need a therapist too, don't we? I don't work as a therapist, but I think, and that's exactly the thing. Here we are again. We've come full circle. Complete mental health is
Yeah.
both not having an illness
Yeah.
and having high well-being, and so that journey from having a mental illness or whatever, don't we all have some sort of small t trauma in our
But
lives
I
or
have three
whatever, I
coaches
think,
myself that I work with, like are helping
yeah,
because I need to grow too. So I have a Reiki healer, I have a fitness
wow,
coach, and I have a growth business coach. So I need like someone to
oh,
do business with too. So it's like,
yeah,
yes, because I'm doing this. I work with companies for 12 years, and I used to work with
wow,
corporate world, right? So coaching is like been 1 year. So of
yeah,
course I need someone who's already doing it for years to work like to
yeah.
help me. Yeah.
Yes,
So
incredible. I love that. Sounds like the most powerful package, having a business
it's a
coach,
very
a
good
fitness
package. I'm
coach.
very
Yeah.
different, like three different people with three different like mindset. But all we
Yeah.
have in common is like we always talk about this. And even though I do it and I know all about the brain, I still need to implement things for myself. I need to
We all
eat my own
do.
medicine. Right. And
Yeah.
that's why I need my accountable coach to say, hey, did you put in the action items? Did you do
Yeah.
this? Did you do that? And it's like, I need
Yeah.
that.
Exactly. And we all do, because again, life is a roller coaster. Life is complex. There's constant change absolutely everywhere that impacts us, including ourselves. We also change. Even if
Yeah.
at some stage 10 years ago, we understood our interests and strengths and values and passions and what have you, they might have changed. We know that even personality can change, and it does. Even though it's quite stable in life, it can change, and our values can change. We need to sit down and redo the work, again and again. So and then so life changes, we change, and the
Yeah.
interaction between the two also creates change. These are complex systems. So 100% I agree with you. We all can benefit so much from support systems to
Yeah.
address the various
We
life
all need
aspirations, I guess, and support us to feel well and function well in life, which also is something, you could call flourishing, or how you could define flourishing as well.
Yeah, and I'm in a good space, but I still need the push, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. We're
So
all
we all
human.
need this. We all need this. So I'm also doing the same things as my clients, but just
Mm.
in a different way. I'm in a different place, but I guess this
Yeah,
is
of
like a
course.
life journey, and an
Yeah.
allergy is killing me. Sorry.
Oh, there you go.
Super season allergies.
Yeah.
It's amazing having you on, Mike. Is there anything last thing you want to say to people, as like a last note on, yeah, on the whole thing that you help me, like the languishing to flourishing? Is there anything they
That's
can
a
take with them,
beautiful
take
question.
away?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I appreciate that. That's a beautiful question. If I think about it now, I would say feel invited to take yourself seriously and how you're feeling, because I guess languishing can be silent and it can be in the background, and it's can be barely noticeable. I've been languishing in my career before I start working for myself. I have a very long standing academic career. I was languishing for years. And I always say it was a little bit like a small rock in the shoe. Like,
mm,
you have a small rock in the shoe, you kind of notice it, but it's so small. You just push it aside with your toes, and it's like you just keep walking until, one day there's a blister, or you feel like it's become
yeah,
Mount Fuji,
yeah, yeah,
So take it seriously, because you don't want it to it's not going to go away on its own. Take it seriously. Take yourself seriously. You deserve to be living fully and to be flourishing in life and to be feeling happy and to be functioning well and to
yeah,
feel like you can be your best self, and and realize your potential and live your best life. I just feel like so often, because I know you're in Denmark, I grew up in Germany, I now live in Australia, or been digital nomading for a few years. I know just how privileged I've been in life.
yeah,
And sometimes people who live in privileged civilizations, they almost feel a sense of guilt around, but I kind of, I shouldn't want more. What
mm,
else could I want in life? You know,
mm,
really, I've got everything I need. Should I really, engage a coach or a therapist or
mhm,
whatever to
mhm.
help me do even better and flourish and so forth? And I just think everything is relative in life. And, we all deserve to be feeling well and doing well and functioning well and to be flourishing in life. And never forget that when we flourish ourselves, we are better equipped to support others to flourish as
Yeah.
well. So
Absolutely, it's a positive boomerang. That's how I look at it.
exactly, that's exactly what it
So
is.
that was beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on. And where can
Oh,
people
thank you for having
find
me.
you if they want to work with you? Where are you most active?
They can find me on LinkedIn if they look for Dr. Maike Neuhaus and they have an understanding of how to spell that complex name. But you can also find me on Instagram at The Flourishing Doc, as well as on my website, theflourishingdoc.com. So yeah, would love to get
I
in
will
touch.
add in your yeah, so people can find you when we release the podcast. So it will be there,
That's
so people
lovely.
can get in touch with you. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for coming on. That was amazing. So
Thank you
thank you,
so much for
Maike.
having me.
Of course,
Thank
it was
you.
an honor. So, you guys, see you in the next episode. This is done deal now, and it will be released on Spotify, Apple, and on my YouTube channel. And Maike will be, her links will be available, so you can get in touch with her. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.